Marilyn Chaney learned that her worth as a woman could be measured in failed pregnancy tests and pitying looks from pack healers when she was 26 years old. For years of trying, for years of hoping every month that maybe this time it would work. For years of watching Lucas, her mate, the man who promised to love her regardless, grow increasingly distant, increasingly resentful, increasingly vocal about her failure to provide him with heirs. The Silverpine pack doesn't tolerate failure well, especially not in women. Especially not the kind of failure that threatens bloodlines and succession and the continuation of pack strength through future generations. When the healers finally declared her irreversibly infertile, something about scarred fallopian tubes, damaged ovaries, a body that simply couldn't sustain pregnancy, Marilyn felt something inside her die. Not hope. She'd lost that months ago. But the last shred of belief that she might be worth something beyond her reproductive capacity. Lucas dissolved their mate bond 2 days later. He did it publicly at the monthly pack gathering, in front of 300 witnesses. He stood on the raised platform where alphas make official announcements and said, "I, Lucas Brennan, dissolve my mate bond with Marilyn Chaney on the grounds of her inability to fulfill basic mate obligations. A barren woman cannot be a proper mate. This bond is ended." The words were formal, rehearsed, delivered with the cold precision of someone who'd practiced them. Marilyn stood in the crowd, invisible despite being the subject of the announcement, and felt every eye turn toward her with a mixture of pity and contempt. Barren. The word echoed in her mind like a death sentence. Pack Alpha Gerald Thorne confirmed the dissolution with barely concealed relief. Marilyn had always been low-ranking, daughter of a deceased Omega and a father who'd left the pack years ago. Her mate's bond with Lucas, a beta, had been the only thing giving her status. Without it, she was nothing. "Marilyn Chaney, you have 24 hours to gather your belongings and leave Silverpine pack territory," Alpha Gerald announced. "You are no longer under pack protection. Cross the border by sunset tomorrow, or you'll be treated as a rogue trespasser. No appeal. No chance to plead her case. Just expulsion, as casual and final as taking out the trash." Marilyn didn't cry. She was too numb for tears. She just nodded, turned, and walked out of the gathering hall with whatever dignity she could scrape together. The next 24 hours passed in a blur. Pack members avoided her like she was contagious. Her few friends, if they'd ever really been friends, didn't visit or offer help. Lucas's new mate, a young, fertile Omega named Sophie, moved into the house Marilyn had shared with Lucas before Marilyn had even finished packing. They boxed up her belongings and left them at the territory border. 3 cardboard boxes containing 4 years of life reduced to objects that could fit in the trunk of a car she didn't own. Marilyn crossed into unclaimed territory just as the sun was setting, pulling one box behind her because she couldn't carry all 3. She'd come back for the others later, she told herself, though she knew she probably wouldn't. What was the point? She found an abandoned cabin about 3 miles into unclaimed lands, human construction, decades old, half collapsed but still providing shelter from the elements. She moved in like a squatter, which is essentially what she was. A rogue with no pack, no purpose, no future. For 3 days, Marilyn existed in a fog. She ate because her body demanded it. She slept because exhaustion claimed her. But she didn't plan, didn't hope, didn't see a path forward that involved anything except slow deterioration into actual rogue status, feral, dangerous, eventually hunted down by pack enforcers as a threat. On the 4th day, the Alpha King arrived. Marilyn didn't know he was coming. No one told her. Why would they? She was nobody now, not worth informing about anything. She was gathering firewood near the cabin when she felt it, the oppressive weight of massive power, so overwhelming it made her knees weak. Every instinct screamed at her to submit, to lower her eyes, to make herself small and non-threatening. She turned and saw him. Alpha King Simon K. stood at the edge of the clearing, and Marilyn's brain struggled to process what she was seeing. He was enormous, at least 6 feet 8, with shoulders broad enough to block sunlight. His dark hair was pulled back severely, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face. His eyes were the pale silver blue of winter ice, and they were locked on her with an intensity that made breathing difficult. Behind him stood 3 guards in formal military dress, their postures rigid and alert. "Marilyn Chaney," Simon said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. "Alpha King," Marilyn managed, dropping into a clumsy bow because she didn't know what else to do. I'm sorry, I didn't know you were coming. This isn't technically pact territory, so I thought." "I'm not here about territorial boundaries," Simon interrupted. "I'm here about you." Marilyn's brain stuttered to a halt. "Me? I'm claiming you as my chosen mate," Simon said, as casually as if he were commenting on the weather. "Effective immediately. You'll come with me to the Northern Territories, where you'll be formally installed as Luna Queen." Marilyn stared at him. The words made no sense. They were sounds, arranged in grammatically correct order, but the meaning refused to penetrate. What?" she finally managed. "You heard me," Simon said. "I'm claiming you, choosing you, making you my mate and my queen." "But I'm infertile," Marilyn blurted out. "I can't give you heirs. That's why Lucas. That's why the pack." "I don't care," Simon said flatly. "You have to care." Marilyn's voice rose despite herself. "You're the Alpha King. You need heirs, succession, bloodline continuation. I can't provide any of that. Claiming me would be my choice to make," Simon interrupted, his voice hardening. "And I've made it. Now you can come willingly, or I can invoke my authority as Alpha King to command your compliance. But either way, you're coming with me." Marilyn felt like the world had tilted sideways.
"Why?
Why would you choose someone who's worthless?" Simon's expression shifted, not quite anger, but something colder. "You're not worthless. And the pack that convinced you otherwise is about to learn a very expensive lesson about disposing of what they don't understand." He extended one massive hand toward her.
Come.
"We have much to do, and I've wasted enough time watching you suffer in this hovel." "Watching me?" Marilyn's voice cracked. "You've been watching me?" "For 3 days," Simon confirmed. "Making sure you'd survive. Ensuring no actual rogues found you. Giving the Silverpine Pack just enough time to feel secure in their decision before I destroy them for it." The words should have terrified her. Instead, Marilyn felt the first stirring of something she hadn't felt in 4 years. Hope. "If I come with you," Marilyn said slowly, "what happens to Lucas? To the pack? To Alpha Gerald?" Simon's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "They're condemned. All of them. For throwing away what belonged to me." "I didn't belong to you," Marilyn protested weakly. "You do now," Simon said. "The question is whether you want to watch them burn, or whether you'd prefer to be merciful." Marilyn looked at the man offering her his hand. The Alpha King who somehow saw worth in her that her own pack couldn't. Who was promising to punish everyone who'd hurt her. Who was offering her a future she'd thought impossible. She thought about Lucas's cold dismissal. About Alpha Gerald's casual cruelty. About 300 pack members who watched her expulsion without a single voice raised in protest. She took Simon's hand. "Let them burn," she said quietly. Simon's smile widened. "Good answer." What happens when an Alpha King claims a woman her own pack declared worthless and infertile? Why would Simon K. risk his bloodline for someone who supposedly can't give him heirs? And what does condemn them all actually mean? How brutally is he about to punish the Silverpine Pack for throwing away a woman they never understood? If you want to see power reversals so extreme they redefine justice, if you want to watch an Alpha King systematically dismantle everyone who hurt his chosen mate, and if you want to discover the shocking truth about Marilyn's supposed infertility that makes everything infinitely worse for the people who discarded her, subscribe now. Because this isn't just a love story. This is judgment. This is condemnation. And this is what happens when you throw away something that belongs to the most powerful Leakin in existence. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in cosmic justice, protective rage, and the satisfaction of watching cruel people realize they just made the biggest mistake of their lives. The journey from unclaimed territory to the Northern Territories takes 6 hours by convoy, 3 armored vehicles, a dozen guards, and Simon K. sitting across from Marilyn in a vehicle so luxurious it makes her feel like she's hallucinating. Marilyn hasn't spoken since they left the cabin. She's too overwhelmed, too shocked, too certain that this is some kind of elaborate dream or cruel joke. Alpha kings don't claim infertile women. They don't elevate nobodies to Luna Queen. This doesn't happen in real life. But Simon's hand is warm where it rests near hers on the seat. His presence is overwhelming but somehow not threatening, at least not to her. And every time she glances at him, he's watching her with an expression she can't quite read. "You have questions," Simon says finally, his voice breaking the silence. Marilyn has approximately 8 million questions. She starts with the most pressing. "Why me? Why not you?" "Because I'm infertile," Marilyn says, frustration creeping into her voice. "Because I have no status, no power, no ability to give you what an alpha king needs. Because claiming me makes no strategic sense." "Strategy isn't everything," Simon says. "It is for alpha kings," Marilyn counters. "Your entire existence is strategic. Territory, alliances, bloodlines, everything is calculated. So claiming someone who can't provide heirs is..." She trails off, searching for the right word. "Unprecedented," Simon finishes. "Yes, it is. And that's precisely what makes it powerful." Marilyn stares at him, not understanding. Simon leans forward slightly. "Tell me, Marilyn, in all your years in Silverpine Pack, were you valued for anything beyond your potential to produce children?" The question is a knife straight to her heart. "No," she admits quietly. "Were you asked about your intelligence? Your skills? Your observations about pack dynamics or political relationships? Were you treated as a person with intrinsic value, or as a womb that happened to have a woman attached?" Marilyn's throat tightens. "The second one." "Exactly," Simon says. "Which is why the Silverpine Pack, and every pack that operates under that system, is fundamentally weak. They waste half their population by reducing women to breeding stock. They discard competence because it doesn't come wrapped in fertility. They miss opportunities because they're too focused on bloodlines to see talent." He pauses. "You're not infertile, Marilyn. But even if you were, you'd still be valuable. And the fact that your pack couldn't see, that makes them fools. Dangerous, short-sighted fools." "How do you know I'm not infertile?" Marilyn asks, her voice barely above a whisper. "The healers tested. The healers lied," Simon says flatly. "Or were paid to lie. We'll find out which when we investigate." "That's impossible." "Why would they?" "Because someone wanted you gone," Simon says. "Someone with access to resources and motivation. My guess is Lucas's new mate, Sophie, or her family. They needed your infertility diagnosis to justify Lucas dissolving the bond. A false diagnosis accomplishes that nicely." Marilyn's world tilts again. "You're saying I might not be infertile? That I was thrown away based on a lie?" "I'm saying we'll find out the truth," Simon says. "And when we do, the consequences for everyone involved will be proportional to their crime. Fraud, conspiracy, destroying a woman's life for personal gain. Those aren't small offenses." The convoy arrives at the Northern Territories capital as twilight deepens into night. The palace is massive, black stone and silver accents, built into the side of a mountain so it looks like part of the landscape itself. It's beautiful and intimidating in equal measure. Marilyn is escorted to chambers that are larger than the entire house she shared with Lucas. She's assigned a personal aide, a kind woman named Helena who doesn't ask invasive questions or treat her with pity. She's fed a meal that's better than anything she's eaten in months. She's given clothes that actually fit and feel expensive against her skin. It's overwhelming, surreal, wrong in ways she can't articulate. Simon visits her chambers late that evening, after she's had time to eat and process the bare minimum of her situation. "We need to discuss the formalities," he says without preamble. "Tomorrow, you'll be formally introduced to my council as my chosen mate. The day after, we'll hold a public ceremony claiming you as Luna Queen." This timeline is aggressive, but necessary. Necessary for what? Marilyn asks. "For establishing your status before the Silverpine Pack can interfere," Simon says. "Once you're formally Luna Queen, protected by my authority and the full weight of Northern Territory law, they can't touch you. Can't challenge the claim. Can't try to drag you back or contest my choice." Would they try? Alpha Gerald is ambitious and stupid, a dangerous combination. He'll try to leverage your former connection to his pack for political advantage. Or he'll try to challenge my claim as illegitimate since you were expelled. I'm removing those options before he can exercise them. Simon's eyes narrow. "But more importantly, I'm establishing your status so that when I condemn them, everyone understands why. The Alpha King doesn't punish random packs without cause. But when a pack discards the woman who is now Luna Queen, that's different. That's personal. That's justification for sanctions that would normally be considered excessive." "You're using me as a weapon," Marilyn says slowly. "I'm using your story as a weapon," Simon corrects. "Against a pack that values women only for their wombs. Against a system that discards people for perceived weakness. Against the kind of casual cruelty that destroys lives without consequences. You're not the weapon, Marilyn. You're the reason for the war." Marilyn sits with that for a moment. Then, what if I don't want a war? What if I just want to move on, forget the Silverpine Pack ever existed? "Then they learn nothing," Simon says. "They discard you, face no consequences, and continue treating women as disposable. Is that what you want?"
"No," Marilyn admits.
"But I'm not sure I want to be the reason for their punishment either." "You're not the reason."
"They are."
They made choices. Lucas dissolving the bond, Alpha Gerald expelling you, the healers lying about your diagnosis. Those choices have consequences. I'm simply ensuring those consequences actually happen instead of letting them slide because the victim is just an Omega woman with no status. Simon stands.
"Sleep.
Tomorrow will be intense." "And Marilyn," he pauses at the door. "Thank you for taking my hand. For trusting me enough to come here. I know this is terrifying and confusing, but I promise you'll never be thrown away again." He leaves before Marilyn can respond. She lies in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning. 24 hours ago, she was living in a half-collapsed cabin, waiting to die. Now she's in a palace, about to become Luna Queen, at the center of what Simon calls a war against the Silverpine Pack. And somewhere buried in all of this is the possibility, the tiny, terrifying possibility, that she was never infertile at all. That everything she suffered, every humiliation she endured, was based on a lie designed to get rid of her. If that's true, if the healers really were paid to destroy her life, then Marilyn doesn't just want the Silverpine Pack punished. She wants them destroyed. Marilyn wakes to Helena gently shaking her shoulder. "Luna, it's time to prepare for the council meeting."
"Luna."
The title sounds foreign, impossible. Marilyn has been in the Northern Territories for less than 24 hours, and already she's expected to face Simon's council as his chosen mate. The preparation is elaborate. Helena oversees a team that bathes Marilyn, styles her hair, and dresses her in formal attire, a gown of midnight blue that somehow fits perfectly despite no one taking her measurements. The fabric is heavier than anything she's worn, rich with embroidery that catches the light. "You look like a queen," Helena says, satisfaction evident in her voice. "I look like I'm wearing a costume," Marilyn corrects, staring at her reflection. The woman looking back is elegant, composed, regal, everything Marilyn doesn't feel. "Fake it until it becomes real," Helena advises. That's what all queens do. Simon collects her personally, and Marilyn's breath catches when she sees him. He's dressed in formal black with silver accents, his crown a simple circlet that somehow makes him look more dangerous rather than decorative. When his eyes land on her, something flickers in their pale depths, approval, maybe, or possessiveness.
Perfect, he says. Come.
The council is assembled. The council chamber is intimidating, a massive room dominated by a circular table where 15 people sit in high-backed chairs. They all turn when Simon enters with Marilyn, and she feels the weight of their assessment, their judgment. Simon doesn't give them time to voice objections. Council members, I present Marilyn Cheney, my chosen mate and your Luna Queen. She'll be formally crowned tomorrow, but as of this moment, she holds full Luna authority within the Northern Territories. Silence. Then an older man with silver hair speaks. Alpha King, with respect, we received reports that this woman was expelled from Silverpine Pack for infertility. Choosing a mate who cannot provide heirs is my decision, Simon interrupts, his voice hardening. Not yours. Marilyn is my chosen mate. That status is not subject to council approval or debate. But the succession will be addressed when and if necessary. Bloodline is not the only path to succession. Adoption, designation of heir from extended family, any number of alternatives exist. This council's obsession with biological heirs is noted and dismissed. The silver-haired man, Elder Thomas, Marilyn learns later, looks like he wants to argue further, but subsides under Simon's glacial stare. A woman speaks next, her voice measured and diplomatic. Alpha King, perhaps if we understood your reasoning for this choice, the council would be more comfortable with. I don't require the council's comfort, Simon says. I require their respect for my authority. Marilyn is Luna Queen. She will attend all council meetings, contribute to decisions, and exercise Luna authority as she sees fit. Anyone uncomfortable with that may resign their position. No one moves. No one speaks. Simon turns to Marilyn. Luna, would you like to address the council? Marilyn's stomach drops. She wasn't prepared for this. But she looks around the table and sees variations of the same expression she saw in Silverpine Pack. Doubt, dismissal, the assumption that she's weak because she's been labeled worthless. I understand your concerns, Marilyn says, keeping her voice steady despite her nerves. I was expelled from Silverpine Pack 4 days ago after being diagnosed as infertile. My mate dissolved our bond publicly, and I was thrown out of the only home I've ever known. She pauses, letting that sink in. But here's what you should understand. I spent 4 years in that pack being valued only for my potential to produce children. When I couldn't, I became invisible, disposable, trash to be removed. And not one person in 300 spoke against it. Marilyn meets Elder Thomas's eyes directly. Alpha King Simon saw something in me that an entire pack missed. He chose me not despite my supposed infertility, but because he values something beyond breeding potential. If that makes you uncomfortable, if that challenges your assumptions about what makes a woman worthy of being Luna Queen, then perhaps you should examine those assumptions rather than questioning his judgment. The silence that follows is different, thoughtful rather than hostile. Simon's expression doesn't change, but Marilyn sees approval in the slight tilt of his head. The Luna has spoken. This matter is closed. Now, on to other business. I'm implementing sanctions against Silverpine Pack, effective immediately. That gets everyone's attention. What grounds? Elder Thomas asks carefully. Improper expulsion of a pack member, failure to provide due process, and suspected medical fraud resulting in wrongful termination of a mate bond. Simon's voice is clinical, listing offenses like items on a shopping list. Pending full investigation, Silverpine Pack's trade agreements with Northern Territories are suspended, their treaty protections are revoked, and their Alpha is summoned to answer charges before the Continental Alpha Council. That's aggressive, the diplomatic woman says. Alpha Gerald will claim overreach. Let him claim whatever he wants, Simon says. He threw away my Luna Queen like garbage. The consequences for that are non-negotiable. After the council meeting, Helena escorts Marilyn back to her chambers. That was well done, Luna. You spoke with authority. I spoke with anger, Marilyn corrects. There's a difference. Sometimes they're the same thing. That evening, Simon joins Marilyn for dinner in her chambers, a private meal away from the formality of court. He's more relaxed here, less the terrifying Alpha King, and more just a man. You surprised the council today, Simon observes. They expected someone broken, grateful, subservient. I am grateful, Marilyn says. But I'm also angry.
And confused.
And terrified that I'm going to wake up and discover this is all some elaborate hallucination. It's real, Simon assures her, as are the sanctions against Silverpine Pack. As of 3 hours ago, Alpha Gerald received formal notification. He's not taking it well. How is it? He's demanding an audience with me to contest the sanctions, claiming I'm overreacting to a simple pack matter, suggesting that your expulsion was justified under pack law, and I have no grounds to interfere. Does he have a point? Marilyn asks. Pack sovereignty usually means alphas can manage internal affairs without outside interference. Pack sovereignty doesn't extend to fraud or abuse, Simon says. And the moment you became my mate, your expulsion became my business. Alpha Gerald is about to learn that there are consequences for treating people as disposable. What happens next? Simon's smile is cold. Tomorrow, you're crowned Luna Queen in a public ceremony. The day after, we hold the investigation into your infertility diagnosis. And after that... He pauses. After that, we find out exactly who lied, who paid them, and what the truth about your fertility actually is. The coronation ceremony is everything Marilyn never imagined and nothing she ever wanted. Hundreds of witnesses pack the Great Hall, Northern Territory Pack members, visiting alphas, council members, all watching as Simon places a silver crown on her head and declares her Luna Queen before the assembled Leakin community. It should feel triumphant. Instead, Marilyn feels like an imposter wearing someone else's crown. But the ceremony serves its purpose, establishing her status so completely that no one, not even Silverpine Pack, can challenge Simon's claim to her. The investigation begins the next morning in a formal hearing chamber. Simon has summoned the Silverpine Pack healers who diagnosed Marilyn's infertility, along with the Pack's medical records and 3 independent fertility specialists from the Northern Territories. Marilyn sits beside Simon on a raised platform, her new crown a weight she's still learning to bear. Below them, the Silverpine healers, 2 women named Dana and Rebecca, stand with expressions that cycle between defiant and nervous. State your qualifications, Simon orders Dana, the senior healer. Dana recites an impressive list of training and experience. She's been a pack healer for 20 years, specializes in reproductive health, has overseen hundreds of successful pregnancies. And you diagnosed Luna Marilyn as irreversibly infertile, Simon says. Walk me through your testing process. Dana explains the tests: blood work, ultrasounds, examination of reproductive organs. She describes scarring, hormonal imbalances, structural damage that supposedly made pregnancy impossible. Do you have documentation of these tests? Simon asks. Of course. Dana produces a file thick with medical records, test results, images of ultrasounds showing damaged organs. Simon hands the file to his own medical team, 3 specialists who've been reviewing Silverpine's records for the past 24 hours. The lead specialist, Dr. Eleanor Vance, examines the documents with clinical precision. These results, Dr. Vance says slowly, are inconsistent with the patient I examined yesterday. The room goes absolutely silent. Explain, Simon orders. I performed a full fertility workup on Luna Marilyn yesterday, Dr. Vance says. Blood work, ultrasound, comprehensive examination. She has no scarring, no structural damage. Her hormone levels are completely normal. Her reproductive system is healthy and fully functional. She is not infertile. Dana's face drains of color. That's impossible. I performed those tests myself. Then you're either incompetent or lying, Dr. Vance says bluntly. Because the medical records you provided describe a completely different patient. Either you fabricated these results, or you performed tests on someone else and attributed them to Luna Marilyn. I would never, Dana starts. How much were you paid? Simon's voice cuts through Dana's protest like a blade. I wasn't paid anything. I performed legitimate tests. You performed tests that justified Lucas Brennan dissolving his mate bond, Simon says. Tests that gave Silverpine Pack legal grounds to expel an Omega woman with no family protection. Tests that conveniently cleared the way for Lucas's new mate to take Marilyn's place. That timing is remarkable, don't you think? Dana's mouth opens and closes without sound. Simon turns to Rebecca, the junior healer. You assisted with these tests. Did you actually perform them? Or did healer Dana provide you with pre-written results? Rebecca's face crumbles. I thought they were legitimate. Dana showed me the ultrasounds, the blood work. I didn't question. Because you trusted your senior healer, Simon finishes. Which means Dana is the one who fabricated the results. The question is whether she did it for money or other motivation. He stands, and the sheer presence of him fills the chamber. Healer Dana, you have one chance to tell the truth. Who paid you to destroy Luna Marilyn's life? Was it Lucas Brennan? His new mate Sophie? Her family? Someone else with motivation to remove Marilyn from Silverpine Pack? Dana is shaking now. I want legal counsel. I don't have to answer. You're right, Simon agrees. You don't have to answer. But your silence is itself an answer. Guards, take healer Dana into custody pending full investigation. Charge her with medical fraud, conspiracy, and destruction of a mate bond through false testimony. As guards drag a protesting Dana from the chamber, Simon turns to Marilyn. His expression softens fractionally. The truth is what Dr. Vance said. You're not infertile. You never were. Everything you suffered was based on a lie. Marilyn can't breathe, can't process. For years of failure, of shame, of being told her body was broken. All of it false. Fabricated. A conspiracy to destroy her life for someone else's convenience. Who? Marilyn's voice cracks. Who did this to me? We'll find out, Simon promises. And when we do, they'll face consequences that make the sanctions against Silverpine Pack look merciful. The revelation that Marilyn was never infertile spreads through the Leakin community like wildfire. Within hours, every alpha in the Continental Alliance knows that Silverpine Pack threw away a healthy, fertile woman based on fraudulent medical tests. That they expelled the woman who is now Luna Queen because of a lie. Alpha Gerald sends an urgent message requesting an emergency meeting with Simon. Simon denies it. Lucas Brennan sends a letter, 3 pages of backpedaling, claiming he was deceived by the healers, insisting he would never have dissolved the bond if he'd known the truth. Simon burns it without reading past the first paragraph. Sophie's family sends diplomats trying to distance themselves from any involvement in the fraud. Simon has them investigated anyway. That evening, Marilyn sits in Simon's private study, staring at Dr. Vance's medical report confirming her fertility. The words blur together. Healthy reproductive system, no structural abnormalities, fully capable of conception. Each phrase a nail in the coffin of the life she thought she knew. I could have had children, Marilyn says quietly. All those years, I thought my body was broken, that I was defective. And it was all a lie. Yes, Simon confirms. He's reviewing legal documents, preparing charges against everyone involved in the conspiracy. Lucas threw me away for nothing. The pack expelled me for nothing. I lived in that cabin waiting to die for nothing. Not for nothing, Simon corrects. For someone else's gain. That's different. And worse. Marilyn looks at him. Why do you care so much? You barely know me. Why go to war with an entire pack over a woman you just claimed? Simon sets down his documents and meets her eyes. Because I've watched pack after pack treat women as disposable. Reduce them to breeding stock, discard them when they don't perform, and face zero consequences. It's not just wrong, it's wasteful. Stupid. Weak. He stands and crosses to the window. You asked why I chose you. Here's the truth. I've been watching Silverpine Pack for 6 months. Investigating complaints about Alpha Gerald's leadership, looking into treaty violations, assessing whether they're stable enough to maintain their territory. During that investigation, I noticed you. Notice me how? You were managing diplomatic correspondence for Lucas despite having no official position. You were mediating disputes between pack members, even though you had no authority to do so. You were essentially doing half of what a Luna should do, but receiving none of the recognition because you were just a mate with fertility problems. Simon turns back to her. When they expelled you, I saw an opportunity. Not just to acquire a competent Luna, but to make an example out of a pack that embodies everything wrong with the current system. You're not a charity case, Marilyn. You're a weapon I'm wielding against systematic injustice. And yes, you'll benefit from that. But so will every other woman in every other pack who's been told her only value is her womb. It's the most he said about his motivations, and it reframes everything. This isn't just about her. It's about using her story to force systemic change. What if I don't want to be a weapon? Marilyn asks. Then tell me and I'll stop, Simon says immediately. I won't force you into a role you don't want. But Marilyn, they deserve punishment. Not just for what they did to you, but for what they've done to countless other women who don't have an alpha king willing to go to war for them. Marilyn thinks about all the women she knew in Silverpine Pack who were valued only for their fertility, who were discarded when they failed to produce heirs, who suffered in silence because speaking up meant expulsion, or worse. Let them burn, Marilyn says quietly. Everyone involved. I want them to pay for what they did. Simon's smile is sharp and satisfied.
Good.
Because Dana just agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced charges. And her testimony is going to destroy everyone who thought they could get away with ruining your life. So Marilyn just found out that she was never infertile, that the healers literally fabricated medical tests to justify her expulsion, and that everything she suffered for 4 years was based on a conspiracy to get her out of the way for Lucas's new mate. This woman was thrown away like garbage because someone paid the healers to lie about her body, and now those same people are about to face the wrath of an alpha king who's treating this like a personal crusade against systemic injustice. Meanwhile, Lucas is sending 3-page apology letters like, "Sorry I believed the fake medical tests and publicly humiliated you, my bad," and Simon is literally burning them without reading. The audacity. The man dissolved his mate's bond in front of 300 people based on fraudulent medical evidence, and now he wants to claim he was the real victim of this situation? And Alpha Gerald is trying to argue that expelling Marilyn was just a simple pack matter, while simultaneously facing sanctions that are crippling his territory's economy. Sir, you threw away the woman who is now Luna, queen of the most powerful territory in the realm. Read the room. If you want to see exactly who paid Dana to fabricate those medical tests, because we're about to get names, how brutal Simon's punishment gets when he finds out the full conspiracy, and whether Lucas is stupid enough to show up begging for forgiveness, subscribe now because the next phase is about exposure, condemnation, and watching everyone who hurt Marilyn realize they just made a catastrophically expensive mistake. Healer Dana's cooperation comes with conditions. Immunity from the most serious charges in exchange for complete testimony. Simon agrees, but makes it clear that immunity doesn't mean no consequences. Dana will lose her medical license, be banned from practicing healing in any pack, and be publicly shamed as a fraud. The testimony session is held in the same formal chamber, but this time it's packed. Word has spread about the investigation, and every major alpha in the region has sent representatives to witness the confession. This is about more than Silverpine Pack now. It's about setting precedent for how medical fraud and conspiracy against pack members will be handled across all territories. Dana sits in the witness chair looking years older, than she did yesterday. Simon has assigned her a legal advisor, ensuring her testimony can't be challenged on procedural grounds later. State your full testimony, Simon orders. Who paid you, how much, and what exactly you were instructed to do? Dana takes a shaky breath. I was approached by Sophie Garrett, now Sophie Brennan, Lucas's new mate, approximately 6 months ago. She offered me 5,000 gold marks to ensure that Marilyn Cheney's next fertility assessment would show irreversible infertility. The room erupts in shocked whispers. Simon raises a hand for silence. Continue, he orders. Sophie provided me with medical records from another patient, a woman who had suffered severe reproductive damage from a rogue attack. The scarring, the hormonal issues, the structural problems, those were real. They just weren't Marilyn's. Dana's voice cracks. I performed a normal examination on Marilyn, then substituted the fake patient's records into her file. When Lucas requested a formal fertility assessment, I presented the fraudulent results as Marilyn's actual condition. And Rebecca? Simon asks, gesturing to the junior healer. What was her involvement? Rebecca knew nothing, Dana says quickly. I showed her the fake records and told her they were legitimate test results. She trusted my expertise. She's innocent of the conspiracy. Simon nods. Rebecca is cleared of charges. Dana, was anyone else involved beyond Sophie Garrett? Sophie's father, Alpha Vincent Garrett of the Western Ridge Pack, provided additional payment. He wanted Lucas as a son-in-law and saw Marilyn as an obstacle. Together, Sophie and her father paid me 8,000 gold marks total to destroy Marilyn's life. The confession is devastating in its simplicity. No complex conspiracy, no shadowy organizations. Just a woman who wanted another woman's mate and a father willing to pay for fraud to secure an advantageous alliance. Marilyn sits beside Simon, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles are white.
Sophie.
The woman who moved into Marilyn's house before the boxes were even packed. The woman who smiled sympathetically while stealing Marilyn's entire life. Where is Sophie Brennan now? Simon asks his guards. In Silverpine Pack territory with her mate Lucas, Alpha King. Bring her here, along with her father, Alpha Vincent Garrett. They have 48 hours to present themselves for questioning, or I'll send troops to extract them. After the testimony, Simon takes Marilyn to a private balcony overlooking the Northern Territory capital. The city sprawls below them, thousands of lights against the darkness. Sophie, Marilyn says, her voice hollow. I was kind to her when she first arrived at Silverpine Pack. I welcomed her, and she repaid that by destroying my life, so she could take my place. She'll face consequences, Simon says. Criminal charges, social exile, permanent ban from holding any pack position. Her father will face similar sanctions. And Lucas, Simon's voice hardens. Lucas will answer for accepting fraudulent medical evidence without question and using it to publicly humiliate you. What are you going to do to him? Marilyn asks. That depends on what you want, Simon says. This is your justice, Marilyn. I'm executing it, but you get to decide how far it goes. Marilyn thinks about Lucas's cold dismissal, about standing in that gathering hall while he dissolved their bond with rehearsed precision, about the 4 years of increasingly distant treatment as her supposed infertility became his excuse for emotional abandonment. I want him stripped of his beta rank, Marilyn says. I want him banned from ever holding authority in any pack. I want everyone to know that he threw away his mate based on lies he never bothered to verify. I want him to spend the rest of his life watching what he could have had if he'd been even minimally decent. Done, Simon says. All of it. 2 days later, Sophie and her father arrive at the Northern Territory capital under heavy guard. They're brought separately to formal hearings where they're confronted with Dana's testimony, the evidence of payment, and the consequences of their conspiracy. Sophie breaks first. She admits everything, wanting Lucas, paying Dana, fabricating the medical fraud. But she frames it as romantic desperation rather than calculated cruelty. I loved him, Sophie sobs. Lucas was perfect, but he was trapped in a bond with a woman who couldn't give him heirs. I just wanted to free him. You wanted to free his position, Simon interrupts coldly. Lucas is beta of Silverpine Pack, a high-ranking mate with social status and political influence. You didn't love him. You loved what he represented. And you were willing to destroy another woman's life to acquire it. I didn't mean for Marilyn to suffer so much. You paid 8,000 gold marks to ensure she'd be declared irreversibly infertile and expelled from her pack, Simon says. Suffering was the explicit goal. Don't insult us with false remorse now that you've been caught. Sophie is charged with conspiracy, fraud, and destruction of a mate bond. Her sentence: permanent exile from all recognized pack territories, forfeiture of all pack status and privileges, and a public declaration of her crimes circulated to every Alpha in the Continental Alliance. Alpha Vincent receives similar charges, with additional sanctions against his Western Ridge pack for enabling the conspiracy. Lucas is summoned last. He arrives looking defiant despite the evidence against him. Alpha King Simon, Lucas says with a bow that's technically respectful but feels mocking. I understand you have questions about my dissolved bond with Marilyn. I'm happy to explain that I was deceived by fraudulent medical. You were deceived by nothing, Simon interrupts. You wanted to dissolve the bond, and the diagnosis gave you legal justification. You never questioned it because you didn't want to. You accepted it eagerly because it freed you to mate with Sophie. That's not. Dana testified that you approached her 3 months before the diagnosis, Simon continues, pulling out a document. Asking questions about grounds for dissolving mate bonds. Inquiring about what medical conditions would justify termination. You were shopping for excuses before Sophie ever contacted Dana. The conspiracy simply provided what you were already seeking. Lucas's face goes pale. That's taken out of context, is it? Simon's voice is dangerously quiet. Because it looks like you, Sophie, and her father coordinated a conspiracy to destroy Marilyn's life, so you could form a more advantageous mate bond. That's not deception. That's calculated cruelty. I have rights, Lucas protests. Pack sovereignty means Silverpine's Alpha makes decisions about bonds, not you. The moment you touch, dance for me and I'll make you my wife, smirked the mafia boss, and what followed changed everything what belongs to me. Pack sovereignty becomes irrelevant, Simon says. Marilyn is my Luna Queen. You conspired to destroy her through fraud. That's treason against the Northern Territories. And the penalty for treason is not bound by pack sovereignty. Simon stands, and his presence fills the chamber. Lucas Brennan, you're stripped of all rank within Silverpine Pack. You are banned from holding authority in any pack within the Continental Alliance. Your mate bond with Sophie Brennan is declared void due to being formed through fraudulent means. And your name will be circulated to every Alpha as an example of what happens to those who destroy mate bonds for personal convenience. You can't, Lucas starts. I can, Simon says flatly. And I have. Guards remove him. As Lucas is dragged from the chamber protesting and threatening legal challenges, Simon turns to Marilyn. It's done. Everyone involved has been condemned. Does this feel like justice?
Marilyn thinks about it.
Lucas stripped of everything he valued. Sophie exiled and disgraced.
Alpha Vincent S. Pack facing sanction.
Dana losing her medical career. It feels like a beginning, Marilyn says. But there's still Alpha Gerald. He allowed all of this. He expelled me without question based on fraudulent evidence. He doesn't get to escape consequences. He won't, Simon promises. His hearing is tomorrow. And it will be the most public condemnation of all. Alpha Gerald Thorne arrives at the Northern Territory capital with an entourage of advisors and legal experts. He's clearly planning to contest the charges, to argue pack sovereignty and procedural irregularities. Simon doesn't give him the chance. The hearing is held in the Grand Hall, the same location as Marilyn's coronation. Every seat is filled with witnesses, Alphas from across the Continental Alliance, council members, pack representatives, and hundreds of Northern Territory citizens. This isn't just a legal proceeding. It's political theater designed to set precedent. Alpha Gerald stands in the center of the hall, and Marilyn can see the moment he realizes this isn't a hearing he can negotiate his way out of. This is a condemnation. Alpha Gerald Thorne of Silverpine Pack, Simon begins, his voice carrying across the vast space. You stand accused of gross negligence in your duties as Pack Alpha, failure to provide due process to Pack members, and complicity in medical fraud resulting in wrongful expulsion. How do you answer these charges? With respect, Alpha King, these charges are overblown, Gerald says, his voice projecting false confidence. Pack Alphas have authority over internal matters including mate bonds and expulsions. My handling of Marilyn Cheney's situation was well within standard practice. Standard practice, Simon repeats. Tell me, Alpha Gerald, what is standard practice when expelling a pack member? Investigation of grounds, verification of facts, and formal announcement of expulsion. All of which I performed. Did you verify the medical diagnosis that justified Lucas Brennan dissolving his bond with Marilyn? The healers provided documentation. Did you verify it? Simon presses. Did you question the timing? The convenience? Did you wonder why a woman who'd been healthy for 26 years suddenly developed irreversible infertility precisely when her mate was publicly courting another woman? Gerald hesitates. The healers are credible medical professionals. One healer was paid 8,000 gold marks to fabricate the diagnosis, Simon says, which you would have discovered if you'd performed even minimal investigation instead of accepting documentation that conveniently justified expelling an Omega with no family protection. I acted in good faith. You acted with willful ignorance, Simon corrects, because questioning the diagnosis would have complicated a situation you found politically convenient. Lucas is your beta, your second in command. His mate bond with Sophie Garrett created a useful alliance with Western Ridge Pack. Marilyn was in the way. So you accepted fraudulent evidence without question and expelled her based on it. That's speculation, Gerald protests. Is it? Simon gestures, and a guard brings forward a document. These are communications between you and Alpha Vincent Garrett discussing the benefits of a Lucas-Sophie bond. Dated 2 weeks before Marilyn's diagnosis. You were coordinating with Vincent about how to clear the way for Sophie while maintaining plausible deniability. Gerald's face drains of color. Those communications are privileged. Nothing is privileged when investigating fraud and conspiracy, Simon says. You knew Lucas wanted to dissolve his bond with Marilyn. You knew Sophie and her father wanted that bond dissolved. And when the convenient diagnosis arrived, you didn't question it because questioning would have disrupted plans that served your political interests. Simon stands, and the entire hall goes silent. Alpha Gerald Thorne, you presided over a conspiracy that destroyed an innocent woman's life. You expelled her from your pack based on evidence you never verified. You allowed medical fraud to go unchallenged because the results served your agenda. And when that woman became Luna Queen of the Northern Territories, you had the audacity to claim, I'm overreaching by holding you accountable. He pauses, letting the words sink in. You're right that Pack Alphas have authority over internal matters. But that authority comes with responsibility. You failed that responsibility catastrophically. And the consequences will be proportional to your failure. Simon lists the sanctions methodically. Silverpine Pack's trade agreements with all Northern Territory allies are suspended indefinitely. Your treaty protections are revoked. Your pack's representation in the Continental Alliance is reduced to observer status. You personally are barred from attending Alpha Councils for 5 years. And most significantly, you will publicly apologize to Luna Queen Marilyn for your negligent expulsion of her, or I will support any pack that chooses to challenge your territorial claim. The final threat is devastating. Without Northern Territory backing, Silverpine Pack becomes vulnerable to territorial challenges from rival packs. Gerald could lose everything. This is excessive, Gerald protests, but his voice lacks conviction. For one expulsion. One expulsion based on fraud that you enabled through willful ignorance, Simon corrects. One expulsion of a woman who is now Luna Queen. One demonstration of how pack alphas can destroy lives without consequences. I'm ensuring there are consequences. Accept them, or face territorial challenges. Your choice. Gerald looks around the hall, searching for support. He finds none. Every alpha present is calculating what supporting Gerald would cost them versus what opposing the Alpha King would cost them. The math isn't favorable to Gerald. I accept the sanctions, Gerald says, his voice barely audible. Good, Simon says. Now apologize to Luna Queen Marilyn.
Publicly.
Specifically. No vague expressions of regret. Tell this assembly exactly what you did wrong and why it was wrong. Gerald turns to face Marilyn. His expression cycles through anger, resentment, and finally resignation. Luna Queen Marilyn, Gerald says, each word clearly painful. I apologize for expelling you from Silverpine Pack based on medical evidence I failed to properly verify. I should have investigated the diagnosis more thoroughly. I should have questioned the timing and convenience. I should have provided you due process instead of accepting the first justification for your removal. My failure as your alpha caused you tremendous suffering.
I'm sorry.
It's not a good apology. It's stilted, forced, the words of a man who resents having to say them. But it's public acknowledgement of failure from an alpha who thought he was untouchable. Apology noted, Marilyn says, her voice steady. But Alpha Gerald, you should understand something. I don't forgive you. You threw away a member of your pack like garbage, and the only reason you're apologizing is because that garbage turned out to be valuable to someone more powerful than you. If I'd died in that cabin, if Alpha King Simon hadn't claimed me, you'd never have faced any consequences. You'd have forgotten I existed within a week. She stands, and the crown on her head catches the light. So no, I don't forgive you. But I will accept your apology as the first step in you becoming a less terrible alpha. Because the next woman you try to throw away might also have value you're too blind to see. And now you know there can be consequences for that blindness. The hall is absolutely silent. Then, slowly, applause begins. It starts with a few Northern Territory Pack members and spreads until hundreds of people are acknowledging Marilyn's words. Gerald leaves the hall in disgrace, his entourage trailing behind him like mourners at a funeral. After the hearing, Simon finds Marilyn in her chambers. She's staring out the window, still wearing her crown, still processing everything that just happened. You were magnificent, Simon says. The way you refused to offer false forgiveness, that was exactly right. I'm not sure magnificent is the right word, Marilyn says. I feel like I just participated in a very public execution. You participated in justice, Simon corrects. Gerald, Lucas, Sophie, and everyone involved faced consequences for their actions. That's rare. Usually, people like them get away with cruelty because their victims lack power to demand accountability. You have that power now. You used it appropriately. And now what? Marilyn asks. Everyone's been punished. Sophie and her father are exiled. Lucas is stripped of rank. Gerald is humiliated and sanctioned. Dana lost her medical career. Is this where the story ends? Not quite, Simon says. There's one more thing we need to address. What? Your choice, Simon says. You came here because I claimed you, because I offered you protection and status and revenge. But you never had a real choice in that decision. It was accept my claim or die alone in the wilderness. Now you have power, security, and justice. So, I'm giving you the choice I never gave you before. Do you want to stay? Marilyn turns to look at him fully. What does that mean? It means if you want to leave, I won't stop you. I'll provide resources, protection, and support for whatever life you want to build. You can go anywhere, do anything, and my protection follows you. You're not trapped here just because I claimed you. And if I stay, then you stay as Luna Queen, with full authority and genuine partnership. Not because you're trapped, but because you choose it. Because this is where you want to be. Simon's expression is serious, unreadable. I need to know you're here by choice, Marilyn. Not coercion. Not obligation.
Choice.
Marilyn thinks about the past week. About going from thrown-away Omega to Luna Queen. About discovering her infertility was a lie. About watching everyone who hurt her face consequences. About learning that she has value beyond her womb. And she thinks about Simon, the alpha king who saw worth in her that an entire pack missed, who went to war for her, who's offering her freedom even though it would complicate everything. I want to stay, Marilyn says. Not because I'm grateful or obligated, but because for the first time in my life, I'm somewhere that values me for what I actually am. I want to see what I can become with that support. Simon's expression shifts, relief, satisfaction, something warmer. Then welcome home, Luna Queen. Let's build something worth staying for. 3 months after the condemnation of Silverpine Pack, Marilyn is learning what it means to actually be Luna Queen rather than just wearing the title. She sits in on council meetings, contributing observations about policy and diplomatic relations. She establishes a Luna's Court, a forum where pack members can bring concerns directly to her, separate from the Alpha King's formal authority. She begins reviewing trade agreements and finding efficiencies that increase the Northern Territory's economic power. Turns out, for years of being ignored while watching pack politics taught her more than anyone realized. She's good at this. Really good. You're outperforming half my council, Simon observes one evening as they review economic reports together. Elder Thomas actually complimented your analysis of the trade deficit. That man never compliments anyone. I spent years watching Lucas manage pack relations and thinking I could do that better, Marilyn says. Apparently I was right. The relationship with Simon is evolving too. It started as a protection and strategic alliance, but it's becoming something more genuine. They have dinner together most evenings, discussing pack business and gradually sharing personal histories. Marilyn learns about Simon's family, his rise to power, his frustration with systemic injustices he's been trying to reform for years. Simon learns about Marilyn's childhood, her mother who died when she was young, her father who left the pack when she was a teenager. He learns about the slow erosion of her self-worth during 4 years of failed fertility attempts and about the quiet strength it took to survive that erosion. You would have been fine without me, Simon says one evening. You have survived in that cabin, eventually connected with a different pack, built a new life. I didn't save you. I just accelerated your recovery. Maybe, Marilyn admits. But you gave me the ability to face everyone who hurt me from a position of power rather than powerlessness. That's worth something. One afternoon, Dr. Vance requests a private meeting with Marilyn. Luna Queen, I'd like to discuss your fertility in more detail. Marilyn's stomach knots. Is something wrong? No, Dr. Vance assures her quickly. Everything is healthy. But I want to make sure you understand your options. You're fertile. That means pregnancy is possible if you choose to pursue it. But it's not required. You have value regardless of whether you ever have children. It's the conversation Marilyn needed 4 years ago. The acknowledgement that her worth isn't tied to her womb. What if I don't want children? Marilyn asks. What if 4 years of thinking I was infertile made me realize I don't actually need to be a mother to be complete? Then that's a valid choice, Dr. Vance says. And anyone who suggests otherwise can answer to the Alpha King and me. Does Simon want children? Marilyn asks. He's Alpha King. Surely he needs heirs. He's made it clear that biological heirs are optional, Dr. Vance says. There are other succession paths. His priority is having a competent Luna who can help him rule effectively. Everything else is secondary. The conversation frees something in Marilyn. For the first time since her diagnosis, she can think about her body without shame or failure. She has choices, real choices, and whatever she chooses will be valid. The Silverpine Pack situation stabilizes into a new normal. Alpha Gerald has lost most of his political influence, and several families have transferred to other packs rather than endure the sanctions. Lucas has relocated to a small, isolated pack where no one knows his history. Sophie remains in exile, her father's pack struggling without trade agreements. Marilyn could feel vindicated. Instead, she mostly feels tired of thinking about them. They're not worth your attention anymore, Helena observes one day when Marilyn is reviewing reports on Silvapine's struggling economy. I know, Marilyn says. But I need to see it. Need to confirm that there were actual consequences. That what they did to me mattered. It mattered, Helena says. Everyone in the Continental Alliance knows that throwing away a pack member has consequences if that person turns out to be valuable. You changed how alphas think about expulsions. That's significant. A delegation from the Western Territories requests a meeting with Marilyn specifically, not Simon but her. They want to discuss reforming how packs handle mate bond dissolutions, how to prevent fraud in medical diagnostics, and how to provide due process for pack members facing expulsion. They want your expertise, Simon says when he shows her the request. Your experience surviving a broken system makes you the authority on how to fix it. Marilyn takes the meeting. It's the first of many. Over the following months, she becomes an advocate for pack reform, pushing for standardized medical verification processes, mandatory appeals for expulsions, and limitations on alphas' authority to dissolve mate bonds without cause. It's not glamorous work. It's bureaucratic, tedious, and requires endless patience with resistant alphas who don't want their authority limited. But it's important. And Marilyn discovers she's good at it. You're building a legacy, Simon observes 6 months after her coronation. Not just as my Luna, but as someone who's actually changing how the Leakin community treats its most vulnerable members. Is that enough? Marilyn asks. I'm never going to be a traditional Luna. I'm not producing heirs. I'm not focused on ceremonial duties. I'm spending most of my time on policy reform that half your council thinks is unnecessary. It's more than enough, Simon says firmly. You're exactly the Luna I need. The Luna this territory needs. The one who sees problems I miss and has the courage to address them. He pauses. Marilyn, I need to tell you something. I didn't choose you just because Silverpine threw you away. I've been watching you for months before that, seeing how you handled diplomatic correspondence, how you mediated disputes, how you managed complexities that should have been beyond your status. I was looking for a Luna with specific skills, and you had all of them. The expulsion just gave me an excuse to claim you and punish the pack that wasted your talent. So this was strategic from the beginning, Marilyn says slowly. It was strategic, Simon admits. But it became more. You're not just a skilled administrator. You're someone I genuinely enjoy working with. Someone who challenges my assumptions. Someone who makes me better at this job. He meets her eyes directly. I chose you strategically, but I'm keeping you because I want to. Because this partnership works in ways I didn't anticipate. Because coming home to you is the best part of my day. It's the closest Simon has come to expressing real emotion, and Marilyn feels something shift in her chest. Not love, maybe not yet, but the foundation of something that could become love if given time and trust. I want to stay, Marilyn says. Not just because this position is better than dying in a cabin, but because I'm building something here. Something important. And I'm doing it with someone who actually sees my value. Simon's smile is genuine, warm.
Then stay.
Build your legacy. Change the system. And let me support you while you do it. So Marilyn went from thrown away Omega waiting to die to Luna Queen who's reforming pack law across the Continental Alliance and making resistant alphas cry about due process requirements in like 6 months. This woman is out here implementing mandatory medical verification for mate bond dissolutions, creating standardized appeals processes for expulsions, and generally making it so much harder for packs to throw away members for arbitrary reasons. Meanwhile, Simon is attending her policy meetings and watching her destroy bad arguments from corrupt alphas, and he's just like, yeah, that's my Luna, Isn't she terrifying and magnificent? And back in Silverpine Pack, Alpha Gerald is struggling to maintain basic functions because half his family's transferred to other territories and his trade economy is in shambles after losing Northern Territory agreements. Lucas is living in some tiny isolated pack where no one respects him and everyone knows he's the beta who threw away his mate for fraudulent reasons. Sophie is still in exile, probably regretting every life choice that led to this. The justice of it all is just chef's kiss. If you want to see the final phase where Marilyn makes one more major decision about her future, where we find out if she ever wants to have kids or if she's perfectly happy being the policy reform Luna, and whether Lucas ever shows up begging for forgiveness, subscribe now because we're heading into the emotional finale and it's going to be beautiful. 8 months after becoming Luna Queen, Marilyn faces a question she's been avoiding. Does she want to try for children? Dr. Vance has confirmed multiple times that Marilyn is fertile and healthy. The option exists, but wanting it is different from being capable of it. Simon has never pressured her. He mentions occasionally that succession planning should happen eventually, but he's equally open to adoption, designated heirs, or any number of alternatives to biological children. This is your body, Simon says when Marilyn finally brings up the topic directly. Your choice. I'll support whatever you decide. What do you want? Marilyn asks. I want you to make the choice that's right for you, Simon says. If that's pursuing pregnancy, I'm supportive. If it's never having children, I'm equally supportive. My priority is having a functional partnership with a competent Luna. Children are optional. It's the right answer. It's also not particularly helpful for Marilyn's decision-making process. She talks to Helena, who listens patiently and then says, You spent 4 years being told your worth depended on fertility. Now you have the chance to reclaim that narrative. Whether you choose to have children or not, you're making the choice instead of having it made for you. That's what matters. She talks to Dr. Vance, who provides clinical information about pregnancy health, risks, and timelines. And she talks to herself, sitting alone in her chambers late at night, trying to untangle 4 years of trauma from what she actually wants. The conclusion she reaches surprises her. She wants to try. Not because she feels obligated or because anyone is pressuring her, but because she wants to prove to herself that her body isn't broken, that the 4 years of failure were lies, that she can do this thing she was told was impossible. It's about reclaiming her body from the people who used medical fraud to control her. I want to try, Marilyn tells Simon. Not immediately. Maybe in another 6 months after I finish the current round of PAC reform initiatives. But yes, I want to try. Then we'll try, Simon says. When you're ready. No pressure, no timelines. Your body, your choice, your timeline. 3 weeks later, Lucas Brennan shows up at the Northern Territory border requesting an audience with Marilyn. Simon denies the request immediately. Absolutely not. He lost the right to contact you when he dissolved your bond and expelled you from his pack. I want to see him, Marilyn says, surprising herself.
Why?
Simon demands. What could he possibly say that you need to hear? I don't need to hear anything, Marilyn explains. But I want him to see me. See what I've become. See what he threw away. And I want him to know that I'm fine. Better than fine without him. Simon looks skeptical but relents.
Fine.
But it happens here in a formal setting with me present. He doesn't get private access to you. The meeting is arranged for the following week. Lucas arrives looking diminished. His clothes are cheaper than they used to be, his posture less confident. He's declined noticeably in the 8 months since Marilyn saw him last. Luna Queen, Lucas says, bowing low. Thank you for agreeing to see me. I'm not sure agree is the right word, Marilyn says coolly. I'm satisfying curiosity about what you possibly thought you could say to me. Lucas winces. I came to apologize.
For everything.
For believing the diagnosis without question, for dissolving our bond publicly, for not fighting for you when the pack expelled you. I was wrong. Catastrophically wrong. Yes, Marilyn agrees. You were. I've lost everything, Lucas continues. My rank, my status, my reputation. Sophie left me the moment my position was stripped. The pack I'm in now barely tolerates me. And all of it is my own fault. Yes, Marilyn says again. It is. Lucas looks at her desperately. Is there any chance, any possibility, that we could, I don't know, start over? I know I don't deserve it, but… No, Marilyn says flatly. There's no chance. That's not why you're here. Then why am I here? So I could see you, Marilyn says. See what you've become. Confirm that karma exists and that you're paying for what you did. And so I could tell you face to face that I don't forgive you. I don't want reconciliation. I don't want to absolve your guilt or make you feel better about your choices. She stands, and the crown on her head catches the light. I'm Luna Queen now. I'm reforming pack law. I'm building a legacy. And I'm doing all of it without you. You're not even a footnote in my story anymore. You're just the obstacle I overcame on my way to something better. Lucas looks stricken. Marilyn, You don't get to use my name like we're familiar, Marilyn interrupts. I'm Luna Queen Marilyn K. now. You're Lucas Brennan, disgraced former beta. We're not equals. We're not friends. We're nothing to each other. She nods to the guards. Escort him out. And make sure he understands he's not welcome to request further audiences. After Lucas is removed, Simon approaches Marilyn. How do you feel? Free, Marilyn says. I thought I needed closure from him, some acknowledgement of wrongdoing, some apology that would make sense of what happened. But I don't. He's nothing to me now. And that feels right. Good, Simon says. Because he doesn't deserve space in your thoughts. That evening, Marilyn and Simon have dinner together in their private chambers. It's become a ritual, no counsel, no formal protocol, just them talking about the day, reviewing problems, occasionally arguing about policy. I've been thinking, Marilyn says, about what kind of Luna I want to be. I'm never going to be traditional. I'm never going to focus on ceremonial duties or social functions. My legacy is going to be policy reform and advocacy for pack members who lack power. I know, Simon says. That's exactly what I need from you. But I also want to try for children, Marilyn continues. Not because it's expected or required, but because I want to prove to myself that I can. That my body isn't broken. That the 4 years of failure were lies. She pauses. Is that enough? Is wanting to prove something a good enough reason to have children? It's your reason, Simon says. That makes it valid. But Marilyn, if we try, and it doesn't work, if there are complications or difficulties, that doesn't change your worth. You understand that, right? Intellectually, yes, Marilyn admits. Emotionally? I'm still working on it. Then we'll work on it together, Simon says. And whatever happens, you're still the best Luna I could have chosen. 1 year after becoming Luna Queen, Marilyn stands before the Continental Alpha Council proposing comprehensive reforms to pack governance. Mandatory medical verification for all fertility diagnoses, Marilyn says, presenting documented evidence of how fraud can destroy lives. Standardized appeals processes for mate bond dissolutions and pack expulsions. Oversight committees to investigate alpha negligence and abuse of authority. The proposals are controversial. Many alphas view them as attacks on pack sovereignty and traditional authority. You're asking us to limit our power, Alpha Vincent Garrett protests, the same alpha who paid Dana to fabricate Marilyn's diagnosis. He's been stripped of most authority, but still holds his title. Alphas have governed packs for centuries without external oversight. And in those centuries, how many people suffered because alphas abused their authority without consequences? Marilyn interrupts. How many mates were thrown away based on lies? How many pack members were expelled for political convenience? How many people like me suffered because the system protects alphas rather than pack members? She looks around the council chamber. I'm not asking you to eliminate pack sovereignty. I'm asking you to implement basic accountability. To acknowledge that with power comes responsibility, and that responsibility includes protecting your pack members from fraud, abuse, and arbitrary expulsion. The vote is close, but Marilyn's reforms pass by a narrow margin. It's not everything she wanted, but it's progress. Real, measurable progress toward a system that values people beyond their utility to those in power. You did it, Simon says after the vote. Changed continental pack law. That's unprecedented for a Luna. It's insufficient, Marilyn says. But it's a start. And I'll keep pushing for more comprehensive reforms until either I succeed or they vote me out of relevance. They won't vote you out, Simon says. You're too confident. They need you even when they resent you. 6 months later, Dr. Vance confirms what Marilyn has suspected for 3 weeks. She's pregnant. The news hits differently than Marilyn expected. Not joy, at least not primarily. More like vindication. Proof that her body was never broken, that the 4 years of failure were manufactured, that she is capable of this thing she was told was impossible. How do you feel? Simon asks when she tells him.
Validated, Marilyn says.
Which is probably weird, but it's true. I needed to know I could do this. And now I know. And going forward, Simon presses. How do you feel about actually being pregnant, raising a child, everything that comes with it? Marilyn thinks about it. Cautiously optimistic. Terrified. Determined to be a better parent than my father was. Worried I'll somehow fail at this too despite the evidence that I'm capable. That's normal, Simon assures her. Every parent is terrified they'll fail. The fact that you're worried about it probably means you'll be fine. The pregnancy proceeds smoothly, no complications, no issues, just steady growth and normal development. Marilyn continues working on pack reform initiatives, attending council meetings, and building her legacy as the policy-focused Luna who actually changed how packs operate. When she goes into labor 8 months later, Simon is beside her through every contraction, every scream, every moment of pain and progress. And when the baby is finally born, a healthy girl with dark hair and strong lungs, Marilyn holds her daughter and feels something shift permanently in her chest. Her name is Elena, Marilyn says. After my mother. Simon's expression is soft, almost vulnerable. She's perfect. She's proof, Marilyn corrects. Proof that I was never broken. That everything they said about me was lies. That I'm capable of anything, including this. Over the following months, Marilyn learns to balance being Luna Queen with being a mother. It's exhausting, late-night feedings plus early morning council meetings, policy work during nap times, advocating for pack reform while dealing with a colicky infant. But it's her life. The one she chose. The one she built from the ashes of being thrown away. On Elena's first birthday, Marilyn stands on the balcony overlooking the Northern Territory capital, her daughter in her arms. She thinks about the woman she was 2 years ago, worthless, infertile, expelled from her pack and left to die in a cabin. That woman is gone. In her place stands Luna Queen Marilyn Kay, architect of continental pack reform, mother to a healthy daughter, partner to an alpha king who values her for everything she is beyond her womb. Happy? Simon asks, appearing beside her. Getting there, Marilyn says honestly. Still working through 4 years of trauma and a lifetime of being told my only value was reproductive. But yes, I'm happy. Or, at least I'm building a life that might lead to happiness. That's all any of us can do, Simon says. Marilyn looks out at her territory, her people, her future. They threw me away for being infertile. And you condemned them all. But the best revenge isn't their punishment, it's this. It's the life I built. The reforms I implemented. The daughter I'm raising. The proof that I was never the problem. They were. Yes, Simon agrees. You were never the problem. And now everyone knows it. 2 years after Elena's birth, Marilyn receives an unexpected letter. It's from Silverpine Pack, not from Alpha Gerald, but from a group of Omega women seeking her help. The letter details systematic mistreatment, forced matings, lack of medical autonomy, expulsions based on questionable grounds. It's everything Marilyn experienced, and worse. The women are asking her to intervene, to use her authority as Luna Queen to investigate and reform Silverpine Pac's treatment of low-ranking women. Marilyn brings the letter to the next council meeting. I'm requesting authorization to conduct a formal investigation into Silverpine Pac's governance practices, with particular focus on treatment of Omega Pac members. Elder Thomas, who's become one of Marilyn's strongest allies, nods immediately. Given your history with that pack, some might question your objectivity. But I think that history makes you uniquely qualified to identify the problems and implement solutions. The investigation is thorough and devastating. Marilyn personally interviews dozens of Silverpine Pac women, documenting cases of abuse, coercion, and systemic devaluation. What she finds is worse than her own experience. Generations of women being treated as property, their bodies and futures controlled by alphas who view them as breeding stock. The final report is damning. Alpha Gerald is forced to implement sweeping reforms or face having his pack put under Northern Territory oversight, essentially losing his autonomy as alpha. He implements the reforms. Within 6 months, Silverpine Pac has mandatory medical consent protocols, appeals processes for mate bond dissolutions, and protection for Pac members who report abuse. It's not perfect, but it's transformative. You didn't just get revenge, Simon observes as they review the final implementation reports. You made them better. Made the pack that threw you away actually treat people with dignity. Revenge would have been destroying them, Marilyn says. This is something better. This is forcing them to become what they should have been all along. One afternoon, Helena brings news. Lucas Brennan has died. Not through violence or conspiracy, just an accident during a hunt in his isolated pack. How do you feel? Simon asks when Marilyn tells him. Nothing, Marilyn says honestly. He was already dead to me. This just makes it official. Sophie sends a letter requesting forgiveness and reconciliation. Marilyn doesn't respond. Some people don't deserve closure. Alpha Gerald retires 2 years after implementing the reforms, his health declining under the stress of modernizing a pack that had operated under corrupt systems for decades. His replacement is younger, more progressive, and openly grateful for the reforms Marilyn forced on the pack. You changed everything, the new Alpha, a woman named Sarah Cross, tells Marilyn during a formal visit. Silverpine Pac is unrecognizable from what it was 4 years ago. We're actually treating people with dignity now. Good, Marilyn says. Make sure it stays that way. 5 years after being thrown away, Marilyn stands before the Continental Alpha Council again, this time presenting the results of her pack governance reform initiative. 43 packs have implemented the recommended oversight procedures, Marilyn reports. Medical fraud cases have decreased by 60%. Wrongful expulsions are down 70%. Appeals processes are being utilized by vulnerable pack members who previously had no recourse against alpha authority. She pauses, looking around at the assembled alphas. This is what accountability looks like. This is what happens when we value people beyond their utility. This is proof that reform works. The applause is genuine, widespread. Even alphas who initially opposed her reforms acknowledge their success. That evening, Marilyn returns to her chambers exhausted but satisfied. Elena is asleep in her room, watched by trusted caregivers. Simon is reviewing reports in his study. Marilyn finds him and sits in the chair across from his desk. I've been thinking about how to frame my legacy, what I want to be known for when I'm gone. And Simon prompts. Not as the Luna who was thrown away and rescued, Marilyn says, but as the Luna who was thrown away and used that experience to make sure it never happens to anyone else, who transformed personal trauma into systemic reform, who proved that being discarded doesn't define you, what you build afterward does. That's a good legacy, Simon says. Accurate too. They threw me away for being infertile, Marilyn says, echoing the words that started her journey. and you condemned them all. But the condemnation wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. The part where I built something better from what they tried to destroy. Simon stands and crosses to her, pulling her into an embrace that's become familiar over 5 years of partnership. You built something extraordinary. Not just for yourself, but for every vulnerable pack member across the Continental Alliance. That's the legacy. Not the condemnation, the transformation. Marilyn leans into him, feeling the weight of 5 years settle comfortably on her shoulders. I'm glad you chose me. Even if the circumstances were terrible.
Even if it started as strategy.
I'm glad it was you who saw worth in me when no one else did. I'll always see your worth, Simon says. Even when you struggle to see it yourself. Later that night, Marilyn stands on the balcony overlooking her territory one more time. She thinks about the woman she was broken, discarded, convinced she was worthless. She thinks about the crown she now wears, the daughters sleeping in her chambers, the reforms she's implemented across dozens of packs. She thinks about Lucas and Sophie and Gerald and everyone who threw her away thinking she was garbage. And she thinks about how the best revenge is becoming someone they couldn't have imagined. Someone who took their cruelty and transformed it into justice. Someone who proved that being thrown away wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of the story that mattered. They threw her away for being infertile. The Alpha King chose her and condemned them all. But Marilyn saved herself through the choices she made afterward. Through the legacy she built. Through the proof that worth isn't measured by others' judgments, it's created through your own actions. And that's a story worth telling.
The end.
Let's talk about what just happened in the story, because it's layers. Marilyn was thrown away by her entire pack based on fraudulent medical tests paid for by Lucas's side piece and her ambitious father. For years of believing her body was broken, of being told her only value was reproductive, of watching her mate grow distant and resentful, all of it based on lies designed to clear the way for a more politically convenient mating. Then Alpha King Simon showed up, claimed her when she had nothing, and systematically destroyed everyone involved in the conspiracy. Lucas was stripped of rank. Sophie exiled. Alpha Gerald humiliated and sanctioned. Dana losing her medical career. Alpha Vincent's pack crippled economically. But here's what makes this story actually powerful. The revenge wasn't the point. The condemnation was just the beginning. Marilyn used her position as Luna Queen to reform pack governance across the entire Continental Alliance. She implemented mandatory medical verification to prevent fraud. She created appeals processes so vulnerable pack members can't be discarded arbitrarily. She investigated and reformed the very pack that threw her away, forcing them to treat people with dignity. She took her trauma and transformed it into systemic change that will protect thousands of people who never knew her name. And then, after proving she wasn't broken, after building a legacy, after showing everyone what they threw away, she had a daughter. Not because she needed to prove fertility, but because she wanted to. On her terms. In her timeline. As a choice rather than an obligation. The character arc is insane. Worthless Omega Luna Queen. Broken body lies. Healthy and fertile truth. Powerless victim architect of continental reform. Thrown away garbage woman who transformed a system. And through it all, Simon wasn't her savior. He was her partner. He gave her the platform and protection to save herself, to build her own legacy, to prove that her worth never depended on anyone else's judgment. But here's my question for you. What was the actual turning point in this story?
Was it
A. When Simon claimed Marilyn and gave her status/protection? B. When the medical fraud was exposed and everyone realized she was never infertile? C. When Marilyn implemented the pack reforms that changed the system? D. When she chose to have a child on her own terms, not because anyone demanded it? Because I think the answer reveals what you value most in stories like this. Some people will say the external validation, being chosen by power. Some will say B, the truth being revealed, justice being served. Some will say C, the legacy building, the systemic change. And some will say D, the personal autonomy, the reclamation of choice. All of them are valid. All of them are important moments. But which one is the real transformation for Marilyn? Drop your answer in the comments. Let's discuss. And here's the second question. Would this story have been better or worse if Marilyn had actually been infertile? Because on one hand, discovering the diagnosis was fraudulent creates satisfaction. The people who threw her away were wrong, objectively, provably wrong. But on the other hand, does that undermine the message that her worth isn't tied to fertility? If she'd been actually infertile and still become Luna Queen and reformed the system, would that have been more powerful? I'm genuinely curious what you think. Because both versions of the story work, but they work differently. If you enjoyed the story about worth proven through action, not biology, trauma transformed into systemic reform, revenge through becoming better than your enemies imagined, partnerships built on mutual respect rather than dependency, legacies measured by change implemented, not titles held. Subscribe for more stories where the thrown away ones build empires. Justice comes through transformation, not just punishment. Women are valued for competence, not reproductive capacity. Alpha kings are partners, not saviors. The best revenge is succeeding beyond anyone's expectations. Hit that subscribe button if you believe that being discarded doesn't define you. What you build afterward does. If you think systemic change matters more than personal revenge. If you want to see more stories where the worthless ones prove they were never the problem. Because the next story is already brewing, and I promise you, it's going to challenge everything you think you know about power, worth, and what it means to win.